How good is it? One more sleep until the Ashes. 5 tests. Let's take them on. Let's have our fun. Fox Cricket, of course, has the best coverage in the country, from their technology behind the scenes to the action that you will see in beautiful 4K. Make sure that you are watching that and obviously checking in with us after the games each and every night due to the time zones in Perth. Big news tonight also when it comes to the amount of gambling ads on television. Now, there has been a lot of pressure which has been placed upon the government. It looks like one side has won. We'll get to this in a moment or two's time. A couple of things that are not quite obvious as headline news, but still very much worth talking about tonight, including the Australian trucking industry. Without it, the stuff doesn't grow on the shop shelf. Without it, the stuff that ends up turning up on your doorstep that you have bought either as fast fashion or presents from overseas, it doesn't happen. There's some problems in the Australian trucking industry. We'll talk about that. And a yay for the day is going to go to a government that's actually decided to start to rein real estate agents in. So no longer can they turn around and tell you, oh, we reckon this joint, I don't know, probably about $1 million and ends up going for 2 point whatever. Some honesty when it comes to real estate. And we know that that is the nation's investment porn. Now, we have got the biggest audience of the year for our town, not this Sunday, next Sunday, and we have just added a whole bunch of brand new seats. Now, it only took a couple of mentions for us to fill the joint. Well, we found a way to get a bit of overflow. If you would like to join us for the final Our Town of the Year, it is in Echuca in beautiful Victoria. We are there, not this, but next Sunday. If you would like to come, tickets are free, but they are, of course, for fans of the show. Our Town at skynews.com.au, Our Town at skynews.com.au. Tickets are limited. Get in fast. Now, I'm going to use a few terms that the internet seems to love, like I am a very proud girl dad. Both of my little lovelies, of course, little ladies, and I am fully signed up to the idea about the future is female. I'm very aware of all of this. I work with wonderful and passionate women behind the scenes, dearest friends, right? Well, what about, and of course, as I'll discuss in a moment or two's time, women are absolutely taking the lead, certainly on the Liberal side of politics right now, with the Chief Minister in the Northern Territory, Susan Lee, as the opposition leader, Kelly Sloan about to step up in New South Wales, Jess Wilson, the same in Victoria. But may I quickly say something about blokes? Because this month is, of course, the month when the little hairy caterpillar is turning up for many as they raise money, raise awareness, of course. Movember, all about men's health. And not part of Movember, not part of some of the more traditional ways that this time of year is marked, but there was something that took place yesterday, and forgive me that I did not mention it yesterday. There are about 2,500 boots that were placed out the front of Parliament House. These were done by the International Men's Day group in Australia, and they are, sadly, a representation of the blokes that are no longer with us because they chose to end their lives. More than 2,500 empty boots and shoes were placed in front of Parliament House in Canberra on Wednesday to highlight the male suicide epidemic in Australia. The symbolic gesture was made on International Men's Day to expose male suicide, which is one of the country's biggest killers. International Men's Day aims to bring awareness to men's health and well-being. 2,529 men and boys took their life in just the last year. Now, if your family was affected by this in the past 12 months or at any time, strength and love to you with the hole that has been left. If you are one of too many blokes in this country who struggle, there are plenty of places that you can go for help. If you are someone who considers yourself to be a good bloke or a good mate, it is your job to check in on your friends. And a reminder to anyone who is battling tonight, be it after a busy work day or after a little bit of time alone, please contact Lifeline. Really special, really important people, their website, if you prefer texting, but 13 11 14. Now, Dan Repicoli is the special envoy, not a full minister, but a special envoy that the Prime Minister has put in place to deal with men's health and getting the word out about men's health. This is not about Team Red, it's not about Team Blue, but there's certainly a focus. He, yesterday on Facebook, said Happy International Men's Day. Now, as best as I know, this is not something that obviously results in the brunches and the functions and the ribbons and all the rest of it. And we, as I say, future is female, girl dad, I'm cool with all of that about International Women's Day. But I want to quote from somebody inside the heart of government here, who I'm sure I disagree with on many other issues, but how can we not agree on this? He says that the day is important because being a man isn't about pretending that you're tough all the time. It's about being a good bloke. It's about showing up. It's about looking after your mates. It's about being someone the young fellas can look up to. Bloody oath. Well said, Dan. So today being yesterday, today being today, or dare I say every day to come, please do one of the following things. Send a mate a message. Book that doctor's appointment. No matter how unpleasant you may well think it to be, it will save a life, hopefully yours. Tell a young fella that you're proud of him. That's a great tip. And if you're struggling, please talk to somebody. When we back boys and men, the whole community is better for it. Bloody oath. Again, I repeat at the start of the show, to anyone who's struggling, regardless, men, women, kids, people in the back nine of your life, we love you. We need you. We are the better for you being here. It is the privilege of a life to be able to put these messages out across the airwaves and online and on podcast. To the mates in my life, thank you for all the support that you give me, to the family, who I love oh so dearly. Thank you. Again, it is your job when times are good to look around and have an idea when times are tough. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, an incredibly dear friend of mine, I was lucky enough to have two older brothers by another mother, not because we had a split or complicated family, but because they were mates who became dear friends who then became brothers by choice. Sadly, both are no longer with us. I love you, Ev. I love you, bangers. And to everyone else who battles, strength and love to you. Blokes matter, Sheilas matter, and I say both because, as a loving Australian, they are our national pronouns. Now, interesting. Remember, we constantly keep being told it's the Liberal Party that has a problem with women, a problem with women. Well, guess what is about to happen? There is about to be yet another major tipping point here, because you are about to see a very accomplished human being who happens to be female, but worth noting here, Kelly Sloan, take up the cudgels of being the alternative premier, the opposition leader in New South Wales. She is about to become that leader, as you know by now, because Mark Speakman, really a placeholder at best, didn't even keep the seat warm, but obviously he had to disappear. And all of this was some sort of a shock to him. I'm not entirely sure why, and I know apparently a good bloke, blah, blah, blah. Don't know him from a bar of soap, but I certainly know the decisions that were made in government and some of the failures that have been there in opposition. But as you know, he started the day saying, I'm great. They'll have to blast me out. This is what he said this morning, having a chat to LJ.
Even a few hours are a long time in politics.
No, that's right. It got replaced by what happened at the end of the day. At the end of the day, he was flushed from the front bench, flushed from the leadership, and obviously he now, one day will get a chance to be a minister again. But it's important to note that the Liberal Party right now is being led by more women than the Labor Party. This was all done without the quotas, without the systems that have been put in place that has produced, yes, more female representation in terms of MPs and ministers. That's not immaterial. But again, just take note here. You've got a female leader of the federal opposition. You've got a female chief minister in the Northern Territory. You've got a female Liberal leader in Victoria and about to be a female Liberal leader in Victoria. Well done. Again, the problem with women. Now, let's compare this to the Labor Party. Federally, it's blokes ahoy. The leader is a man. The deputy is a man. And remember, Anthony Albanese, well, he sort of jumped the queue because remember when Tanya Plibersek could well have ended up being the leader of the Labor Party. She was a loyal deputy to Bill Shorten. She is of the left. It was her time to take over the leadership of the party between 2019 and 2022. But no, old mate Albo, the great believer in female success, well, of course, he had to push her out of the way because it was his turn. What did they used to say about see how they walk the walk rather than the things that they talk? And also, let's compare the pair. Let's compare the set right now as we go around the country. Lots of blokes, and that doesn't mean automatically they're bad people or anything like that. But again, you've got male leaders of the Labor Party in New South Wales and South Australia and Western Australia, in Tasmania and in Queensland. The only exception to the rule, of course, is Jacinta Allen. meaning that regardless of what the result of the next Victorian election will be, the future of Victoria, and as we start to see now, the future of Australia, it is female, and it is going to be awesome. Not if Jacinda Ardern gets another term, but you get my point. Now, let's talk about the Prime Minister, because he's trying to put a frown upside down. He's trying to pretend that he's still a hit with the international community, despite the fact that the evidence is not great today. We know that when he was talking at the UN, there was 4/5 of bugger all people there. Why? Because it's the Australian leader. That's the way it works. A little reminder about just how little old Australia is not as important as sometimes we think it is. It's the greatest country in the world, but certainly some of these people who think, oh, we're leading the world, guess what? We're part of it. And as you know, he wanted to bring an international UN climate conference to Adelaide. Now, the frustration many of us had with the idea was that this was going to cost $1.4 billion. Some suggestions even higher, but let's even imagine it was $500 million. This was all, of course, going to end up being the total focus of 2026, and in many ways, the distraction that was the Voice in 2023 may well have been replicated in 2026. So thankfully, we have been saved because, as you know, we're not getting it. But this event was being very much talked up. The Labor Party is going to pretend, oh, no, we weren't really that into it. We didn't really put that much effort in. Well, they did. He was the South Australian leader on with Andrew Clennell a bit earlier this week, trying to compare a climate change conference to the Olympics.
It'll be a smaller cost than the Olympics, a lot smaller cost than the Olympics. But in terms of the platform it provides, you know, it's pretty much second to the Olympics in terms of the scale of the event, the number of people that would travel to Australia and spend their hard-earned dollars in our local economy. So there's an economic uplift to be achieved.
Pull the other one, pallet plays, jingle bells. Now, yes, there is a cost difference of multiple $1 billion for the Olympic Games, but last time I checked, a stadium will last a whole lot longer physically and be available to much more things than the in and out of a week of COP. The one that, of course, is happening in Brazil, the one before that was happening in other parts of the world, Azerbaijan, that's right. The Prime Minister deems these events so important that we had to try to host them, but doesn't attend any of them. In fact, he's attended duck, egg, 0, 4/5, bugger all, none, since becoming Prime Minister. But remember, it was such an outrage whether Scott Morrison did or didn't. The moving goalposts of the media, of course. Well, as you know, Turkey, or Türkiye, as they prefer to be known, well, they are going to be hosting this meaningless conference, but we're still going to have to pay for the mini version, which we'll be having in the Pacific Islands.
We consulted our Pacific neighbours. I spoke with Prime Minister Marape. I spoke with Prime Minister Rambuka of Fiji. And what we did, we've come up with an outstanding result. COP31 will be hosted by Turkey.
Hang on. I don't know if you remember when it was you or maybe a mate, when a relationship ended and they pretend, oh, it was mutual. It was mutual. We decided. I wanted to pull a pin as well. We got the receipts. They did not want to break up. They wanted to host it, and while they're pretending that us not hosting it, but hosting the mini lead-up version is somehow the same, is a little different than how they were talking up this potential union with the United Nations. Remember, they're pretending that it was a mutual decision. We got dumped.
It's also a significant concession for Turkey to agree that Australia would be the COP president for the purposes of the negotiations. Significant concessions are what's required when you are trying to find consensus.
The climate skeptics in the coalition say, oh, well, Australia shouldn't do anything because the world needs to act. This is Australia acting and promoting global action as well. This is a very strong outcome.
Sorry, let's try that again. Here they are, absolutely talking up what now they are pretending is a perfect result when it's not the one they wanted and was going to cost us $1 billion.
I tell you what would be an even better trade exhibition. A conference of the parties meeting, a COP meeting here in Australia, which an Albanese Labor government will bid to host here in Australia.
We take COP very seriously. We are advocating to host.
I know this is a boring answer, but it happens to be a factual one. Australia has the overwhelming support of the world and our group to host COP31.
Continue to advocate for Australia to host the COP.
Big opportunities to host a COP in Australia, and I can assure you the Prime Minister would be there in Adelaide.
We wanted it, but guess what? COP wasn't just that into us. So we are going to have to accept the idea that, no, it'll be held by Turkey. Oh, no, but the presidency will be ours and we'll be please, right? So I never wanted it. I'm glad we didn't get it. I know some people wanted it because they wanted the whole freak show that would come with it, but I'm glad that the $1 billion aren't going to be spent. But now that the government is not going to be spending this $1 billion, perhaps I could suggest where they're going to spend their $1 billion. The $1 billion that would have otherwise been spent on the COP, well, it can be spent in a lot of other areas, that of course being dealing with the fact that, 3 million Australians will run out of food sometime this week? Any chance they're going to move the $1 billion to that? Or do we just not spend it because it's not what we wanted? And he didn't want to hang out with us. I don't care that we are the de facto negotiating this, that and the other, but the government's got a choice, an opportunity here. They've spent millions of dollars trying to get it. They were planning to spend $1 billion. Well, why not spend the $1 billion on something that will actually turn around some lives and save some lives here in Australia? Why not? Or is that, of course, just magical thinking? A little bit like Australia is in a position to tell the rest of the world what to do, despite the fact that we are not that much part of the problem. Which brings me to this. Now, when it comes to climate change, yes, climate change is real, no question to me, right? You can't have 7 billion people on the planet, multiple industrial revolutions, without something happening to the natural environment. Now, whether you believe it to be the catastrophe that we're going to have 1,000 years of heating, which some scientists were trying to tell us earlier this week, or whether you're the Bill Gates of it all, and I don't like quoting him, but he says it's not going to be the end of humanity. Here is an inconvenient truth about Australia and climate change. We are 1% of global emissions. 1%. Doesn't mean we do nothing. Doesn't mean we look the other way. Doesn't mean 4/5 of bugger all. Doesn't mean we don't have to do our bit. But a reminder here, kids, Australia is 1% of the problem, which means we're 1% of what is affecting our atmosphere. China, the third world, that's half of the pollution. The United States, India, Russia, that's 45 minutes on the climate clock. The reality is that while we must do our bit, and I have no problem with doing our bit, whatever we do here is mainly pushed away by China. Now, of course, it's very rare that we get up in their face, despite the fact that climate change is the single biggest and most important thing that we must bring the United Nations and all of the freeloaders to Australia. When they had a chance to talk about it to the United States President, what do you reckon? Nothing, zero, no chat about that. But there's a couple of things we do have to deal with here, which is, to what proportion does Australia have to do its bit? How fast, how much? That's a discussion. Now, if you're in the group of people who say there's nothing, it's okay, fine. But the reality is, I don't think you can have 7, 8, 9 billion people on the planet, multiple industrial revolutions, without there being a need for some sort of an action to what is clearly being done to the planet. No question. The Liberal Party, as you know, has made its decision. They're pulling back from the Labor Party approach to everything, which is net zero by 2050, but let's all pretend that it's December 2049 and quick, hurry, get there. Now, the Labor Party, of course, loves to pretend that the Liberal Party position, by moving away from their commitments and doing things their way, is somehow that the right of Australian politics doesn't believe in climate change and has no interest in doing our bit. Perfect example. Murray Watt, the Environment Minister, today was giving a speech in Queensland at the Queensland Media Club. And in the same way, they just lied over and over again until, yes, the majority of Australians believed it about Medicare. They're sort of doing the same now when it comes to the Liberals and the Nationals, and whether the right side of Australian politics, the alternative government, even thinks there's a problem to be dealt with. Quote, the Liberals' humiliating handover of climate and energy policy to the anti-renewable zealots who still debate whether climate change is real is like putting Dracula in charge of the blood bank. Now, a little reminder, just like the Medicare thing was garbage, what is now going to become the supposed wisdom of the world is that should there be a change of government, then Australia will simply do nothing when it comes to climate change. Well, that's not true either. The position of the opposition is to be proportional. That, yes, do we have to do something? You betcha. Why? Because we're part of the world. But we're 1% of the problem. We're not 100% of the solution. In fact, even after they made the decisions to walk away from the commitments the government has made in relation to 2030, 2035 and 2050, the opposition still says we have to do something about climate change.
Our commitment, which is to reduce emissions year on year.
The reality is we're still committing to reducing emissions.
Australians deserve affordable energy and responsible emissions reduction.
To reduce emissions and to bring down your energy bill.
Responsible emissions reduction.
That's the truth. But Murray Watt out there today in Queensland pretending that the opposition's position is nothing to see here, it doesn't exist. Knuckle dragon, hee-haw stuff, despite the fact that that's not the case. But then there's the bit that should be a problem for the people who believe that Australia is able to fix the world's problem. Again, by way of attacking his political opponents, he said this. He's a senator from Queensland, so his point was the federal coalition's decision exposes Queenslanders to more frequent and more intense natural disasters. We are the most disaster-prone state in the country, with floods, cyclones, storms and bushfires wreaking havoc, taking lives and costing billions of dollars every year, more than every other state. Queenslanders live in the reality of climate change every single summer, and it is now starting earlier. And despite us knowing that climate change will drive even more disasters, the federal coalition has just told Queenslanders they don't care. Well, I've just shown you that's not true. But inherent in the attack is the weakness of, in many ways, the justification that people like Murray Watt or the Tiffany Teals or the Looney Greens have when it comes to, if Australia does absolutely everything, then somehow we will change our own weather. Now, again, if every country was putting in as much effort as we were, then guess what? Yeah, probably we would start to be able to slow something. But as I showed you before, China and the third world, half of all of the pollution, well, barely any of these rules apply to them. Once you throw in the United States, who've junked all of the agreements, because Donald Trump doesn't believe that's the case. In fact, you know, he's referred to things like hoaxes and the rest of it. Once you throw in countries like India and Russia, even if Australia does every single thing that someone like a Murray Watt wants, guess what? We're not going to stop the overall conclusion of what is happening when it comes to climate change. Now, I repeat, did you hear the bit at the start where I said, is climate change real? Bloody oath. Can you have 9 billion people on the planet without affecting it? No. Should Australia do something? Yes. But if you're saying that the Liberal Party position, which is to do something about climate change but not as much about climate change, will mean more fires, more floods, are you promising that somehow there will be fewer floods and fires under the Labor Party, under the Greens, under the Teals? No, of course not. Why not? Because you can't. So let's just be a little more realistic, but we are at a time now where more people view climate change as a way of handing on a world that's better than our own. Previously, that may well have been through matters to do with living good lives and faith and organised religion. For other people, it may well have been fiscal discipline. For others, it might have been national security. But now this is the symbol of handing a joint on that is better than we found it. And even if the Liberal Party position is the one that ends up being the government's position, well, guess what? We will, because we'll be putting in effort to try to reverse what's there. But the promise that unless we do absolutely everything and we get the UN to come here and we do everything that the UN wants, that we're still going to have flood, fire and rain, well, guess what? The reality is, even if we do all of that, we will still have flood, fire and rain. When China starts to get serious about it, then yes, we have to step up. We have to go stroke for stroke. But till then, they are taking the proverbial. Remember, what China does with 1 billion people in about 2 weeks is what we do in an entire year. But of course, the Labor Party, just like they lied about Medicare, is now going to lie to pretend that the official coalition position is there's no such thing as climate change, despite the fact that both of the leaders are still saying absolutely, and they need to do something about it, but perhaps just not as fast as Chris Bowen wants to try to impress the rest of the world. Those are the facts. But I look forward to the complaints by me, even pointing out the sheer logic about 1% being able to solve 100% of the world's problems. Now, let us talk about how on social media people decide to, well, of course, spend your money. Remember, this is while you are working, where we have a look each and every day at the nonsense that happens on social media. Why? Because you pay for it. You don't just pay for it when it comes to their wages, you pay for it for the special staffer whose job it is to follow these losers around to make videos like this one from our old mate in Bonner.
Run, little girl, bang,
And then whatever this is.
Look up in the sky. Is it a bird? I think it's a plane. No, guys, it's a bulk billed GP clinic. When you see this sign, it means you're entering a fully bulk billed GP clinic.
Or a rebadged medical centre. And then this happened at the state level too with the Western Australian Premier.
Knock, knock.
Come in.
No, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Tank.
Tank who?
You're welcome.
You know, it's great that Simone is a terrific creative industries minister, because as a comedian, she's dreadful at telling jokes. On a serious note, Simone, do you have any up, dog?
What's up, dog?
Not much. What's up with you?
I get it. There are high information and low information voters, and then there are the ones that are just patronised by the people in power all day, every day. Thankfully, we'll have a detailed conversation.